Chapter 1. Cold Wind from the Void. The reality above the strategium of Antares Prime fractured a bleeding wound of displacement tearing through the stale air. It was not the raw filth of the warp, but the precise surgical incision of imperial authority. The air screamed as atoms were violently rearranged, the smell of ozone instantly overpowering the lingering stench of burnt promethium and dried orc blood. Light blinding and cold as the grave flooded the command deck, casting long, sharp shadows that danced like tortured spirits against the Gothic arches. Napoleon Bonaparte stood motionless at the center of the tactical hololith, his hands clasped behind his back. The sudden violence of the teleportation did not make him flinch. He had seen artillery shells land closer, but he felt it a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the familiar suffocating cold of St. Helena, the damp despair of a cage built not of iron, but of insurmountable power. He watched the light die down, revealing the silhouette of judgment. The judgment of Terra had sent its master. From the fading brilliance, a cadre of figures emerged, their boots striking the deck plates with the heavy rhythmic thud of a funeral march. They were clad in the crimson and black of the Holy Ordos, their faces hidden behind respirators and hoods. At their center stood Inquisitor Silas Vharr. He was a towering figure, not due to genetic bulk, but due to the sheer weight of the authority he wore like a shroud. A purity seal stamped with the high Gothic script for purge hung from his breastplate, swaying slightly with his measured breathing. Commissar Vane, a man who had faced a charging orc war boss without blinking, took an involuntary step back. The fear in the room was palpable, a physical pressure that crushed the lungs. Lord Inquisitor Vane whispered, his voice trembling with the ingrained terror of a man who knows that innocence is no defense. Vharr did not acknowledge him. The Inquisitor's eyes augmented with glowing red lenses locked onto the small, unassuming figure standing by the map table. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. "I have come to investigate the stain of heresy," Vharr intoned. His voice was not loud, yet it carried the acoustic properties of a closing coffin, magnified by the vox grill of his collar. It was a voice devoid of humanity, stripped of all warmth, leaving only the cold logic of extermination. He stepped forward, the servo skulls orbiting his head, clicking and whirring like a swarm of mechanical locusts, recording every micro-expression, every heartbeat of those present. Napoleon raised his chin, his gray eyes meeting the red gaze of the Inquisitor. There was no awe in the exile's face, only the calculating assessment of a general observing a new variable on the battlefield. "And I have come to secure victory," Napoleon replied. His voice was calm, clipping the air with the precision of a guillotine blade. It cut through the Inquisitor's aura of dread, a singular note of defiance and a symphony of submission. "The Orks are broken. Order is restored. Is that not the Emperor's will?" Vharr stopped 3 paces from the general. The smell of sacred oils and old parchment emanating from the Inquisitor clashed with the industrial grease of the strategium. "Victory achieved through corruption is merely a delayed defeat," Vharr stated, his gaze sweeping over the tactical displays that showed the impossible, a hive world saved by maneuver warfare, not brute attrition. "Your methods, Governor Valerius, are irregular. The math of your casualties does not align with the standard catechisms of war. Logic is the supreme, General," Napoleon retorted, turning back to the hololith, dismissing the threat of the Inquisition with a gesture of supreme arrogance. "Faith is the queen useful for morale, but she does not hold the line." A collective gasp rippled through the bridge crew. To speak so casually of faith to a member of the Ordo Hereticus was tantamount to suicide. The scrutineers behind Vharr shifted their hands, hovering over the hilts of power weapons, waiting for the command to purge. Vharr did not strike. Instead, a low, mechanical clicking sound emanated from his throat, a sound of curiosity, or perhaps a targeting cogitator processing data. He walked around the hololith, his steel-shod boots scraping the metal floor. "You speak of logic," the Inquisitor murmured, tracing a gloved finger over the holographic representation of the defensive lines. "Yet I smell the warp on this world. I smell the ambition of a soul that does not belong." He stopped behind Napoleon, leaning down so his voxcaster hissed directly into the general's ear. "Do not mistake my patience for mercy." Napoleon picked up a heavy data slate from the table. It contained the full tactical breakdown of the campaign, the logistical miracles, and the reorganization of the planetary defense force. He held it out to Vharr, not as a report to a superior, but as a challenge to a rival. "Read it," Napoleon commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If you find heresy and efficiency, Inquisitor, then you are the one betraying the Imperium." Vharr took the slate. The leather of his gauntlets creaked in the silence. For a moment, the two men stood locked in a duality of existence, the unstoppable force of dogma against the immovable object of reason. Vharr looked at the slate, then back at the man who wore the face of Governor Valerius, but carried the soul of an emperor. "We shall see, Vharr," said the red lenses of his eyes narrowing. "The truth always bleeds eventually." The air in the strategium remained cold, but now it was the chill of a blade pressed against a throat. Chapter 2. The Dual Chessboard. The governor's palace, once a sprawling monument to the indolence of the hereditary aristocracy, had been gutted. The silk tapestries depicting saintly martyrs were gone, replaced by sprawling tactical maps, pinned directly into the ancient marble. The air, formerly perfumed with lilac and incense, now reeked of burnt oil and the ozone discharge of overworked cogitators. Napoleon Bonaparte sat at the center of this industrial web, a spider weaving a new reality from the strands of a broken world. He did not sleep. Sleep was a tax on time he refused to pay. Around him, a small army of scribe servitors droned like a hive of mechanical bees, their quills scratching furiously against parchment. Napoleon was dismantling the planetary defense force not with a bolter, but with a pen. He was stripping away the nepotism, the ceremonial ranks, and the superstitious rituals that clogged the arteries of the military machine. He was rebuilding the Grande Armée from the dregs of a hive city. Every stroke of his stylus was an execution of incompetence. In the shadow of a high archway, Inquisitor Vharr watched. He was not alone. Commissar Vane stood before him, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill of the room. Vharr's voice was a low rasp, distorted by the vox grill probing for the rot of the soul. The Governor Vharr said, his red oculars drilling into Vane. "He has changed. The records describe a man of appetites, a mediocre bureaucrat. This entity commands with the weight of a Primarch." "Explain." Vane swallowed hard, his hand trembling near his bolt pistol. He woke up, my lord. The Orks were at the gates, and he woke up." Vane looked towards Napoleon, a strange mix of fear and reverence in his eyes. "I have seen men break under pressure. I have seen them turn to the dark powers. But this is different. He does not pray, Inquisitor. He calculates. And when he calculates, the enemy dies. It is not sorcery. It is pure will." Vharr turned his gaze to the Magos Dominus, a hunched figure of red robes and mechadendrites, who was assisting Napoleon with a recalcitrant logic engine. The tech priest's optical array cycled through the spectrums, analyzing the Inquisitor. The governor's efficiency is within acceptable parameters of the Omnissiah's will. The Magos chattered, his voice a burst of binary static and synthesized Gothic. He bypasses the rituals of ignition, yet the machine spirit obeys. It is statistically improbable, yet functionally optimal. Efficiency is a mathematical truth. The Magos continued a metallic claw tapping against a data slate. He treats the war like an equation. The variables are blood and iron. Vharr stepped closer, the heavy scent of incense rolling off his armor. Mathematics has no soul, Magos, the Inquisitor hissed. A machine that functions without the proper rites is a machine prone to demon code. A man who wins without faith is a man who has already lost his soul to the void. Napoleon suddenly looked up, sensing the weight of the scrutiny. He ignored Vane and the Magos, locking eyes with Vharr across the room. There was no guilt in his gaze, only impatience. "I need the naval manifest for the sector," Napoleon demanded, his voice projecting clearly over the din of the servitors. "And I need the fuel reserves of the Judgment of Terra. Your ship is sitting idle in orbit while my supply lines are strangulated. That is a waste of strategic resources." The sheer audacity of the demand silenced the room. A planetary governor demanding the fuel reserves of an Inquisition black ship. The scrutineers tensed, waiting for the order to fire. Vharr did not move. He stared at Napoleon, dissecting the man's posture, his tone the very rhythm of his breathing. This was not the raving of a madman or the seduction of a cultist. It was the arrogance of absolute certainty. "You treat the Inquisition as a logistics depot," Vharr said, his voice dangerously soft. "You tread on ground that burns Valerius." Napoleon turned back to his maps, dismissing the threat. "I treat everything as a tool for victory. If you are not a tool, Inquisitor, then you are an obstacle. Do not be an obstacle." The scratching of the quills resumed louder than before, filling the silence left by the unspoken death threat. Vharr turned away, his black cloak swirling around his boots. He signaled his interrogator with a subtle twitch of his fingers. As they walked into the corridor, away from the hum of Napoleon's industry, Vharr activated his private Vox channel. "Isolate the governor's medical and genetic records from before the invasion." He whispered the sound, like dry leaves skittering on stone. "Compare them to the man in that room. Check for gene seed implantation biomarkers of the arch-enemy or something older. This is not possession. This is replacement." Chapter 3. The Trap of Character. The orbital plate of Antares Prime was a desolate cathedral of steel and void. Here the gravity was artificial, and the air tasted of recycled tin and the phantom copper of spilled blood. This was where Napoleon had broken the back of the Ork, turning a chaotic slaughter into a kill box of mathematical precision. Now the corpses were gone, fed to the protein reclamators, but the scars remained blast marks on the bulkhead scorch patterns that looked suspiciously like deliberate firing lanes. Inquisitor Vharr walked the empty gantries, his boots ringing out like judgment bells in the vast silence. He did not look at the physical damage. He was looking at the psychic residue. To a mind tuned to the Empyrean violence left a stain. Ork violence was a muddy, roaring smear of red and green energy. Human panic was a gray fog. But here the psychic echo was different. It was crystalline. It was sharp. It was cold. Napoleon followed a few paces behind, accompanied by two silent stormtroopers of the inquisitorial retinue. He felt the oppression of the place, the sheer weight of the megastructure hanging in the void. It reminded him of the vast, indifferent ocean surrounding St. Helena, only infinitely darker. He watched Vharr stop at a heavy blast shield, where a squad of PDF had held the line against impossible odds. Vharr ran a gloved hand over the metal. his head cocked as if listening to a ghost. The men who fought here, Vharr whispered, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the empty hangar. They did not die in fear. They did not die in rage. They died with acceptance. They died like cogs in a machine that knew its purpose. He turned slowly to face Napoleon. The red lenses of his mask pulsed with an inner light. That is not human, Governor. Men are messy. Their souls scream when they leave the body. But here silence. A terrible, ordered silence. Napoleon felt a prickle of danger at the base of his skull. The Inquisitor was hunting not for a demon, but for the anomaly of his own mind. He had to retreat not physically, but mentally. He dove into the fractured memories of the real Governor Valerius, the petty grievances, the gout in the left foot, the fear of the dark. He pulled those human weaknesses around him like a cloak. He forced his hand to tremble just slightly, a mimicry of Valerius's nervous tic. I told them what was necessary. Napoleon said, his voice level, but infused with a carefully curated weariness. I gave them a plan. Men will die for a plan if they believe it will work. Is that heresy, Inquisitor? To give a soldier hope through competence. He walked to the edge of the viewing port, looking out at the stars. I do not seek to be their god. I seek to be their architect. Vharr stepped closer, the output of his psychic hood humming with suppressed power. He was pushing against Napoleon's mental shields, tasting the flavor of his soul. He expected the rot of Nurgle or the twisting schemes of Sinch. Instead, he hit a wall of blue-gray steel, a mind that was a fortress of absolute secular rationality. It was blindingly bright and terrifyingly devoid of the Emperor's light. You are not a forgiver. Valerius Vharr said, the purge seal on his chest, catching the harsh lumen light. You do not mourn these dead. You tally them. You spent their lives like currency. I am a victor, Napoleon snapped, turning sharply, the cane in his hand, striking the deck. And victory is the only currency the galaxy accepts. Would you prefer a pious defeat, a martyr's grave for this entire world? I would prefer a soul that I can understand. Vharr replied, his hand resting on the pommel of his power sword. The warp preys on the complex. But you are an enigma. I do not see the touch of chaos on you. I see something else. A hubris so vast it rivals the traitor legions of old. The Inquisitor leaned in the air between them, crackling with psychic static. I will not kill you for heresy today, Governor. I will kill you because you are impossible. Before the sentence could be finished, the silence of the void was shattered. A crimson alarm light began to strobe against the high ceiling, and the Vox sirens wailed a sound of mechanical panic. Auspex contact, a voice crackled through the comms bead, breathless and terrified. Outer perimeter breached. It's not the Orks, my lord. The signature. It's fast. It's Eldar. The dark kind. Vharr froze the psychic pressure, vanishing instantly as his warrior instincts took over. He looked at Napoleon, the interrogation forgotten in the face of immediate annihilation. Napoleon did not flinch. He merely checked the chrono on his wrist, his face a mask of stone. The Drukhari Napoleon said, the name tasting of bile. Then the board is set. We must move. This is not over, Vharr warned, drawing his bolt pistol. History, Napoleon replied, already walking toward the exit, never is. Chapter 4. The Death Belt. The Strategium was drowning in a cacophony of panic. The red alert klaxons had ceased their rhythmic pulsing, replaced by a constant low-frequency drone that vibrated in the teeth of every officer present. The central hololith, usually a stable green representation of the hive, was now a chaotic smear of static and jagged red vectors. The enemy was not the blunt hammer of the Orks this time. It was a scalpel, thin-poisoned, and moving at velocities that defied the laws of inertia. Drukhari, a jagged whisper, rippled through the command crew. The name alone carried the weight of 1,000 nightmares. On the screens, the sleek, predatory silhouettes of raider skiffs and Ravager gunships tore through the upper atmosphere, their shadow fields making them flicker in and out of reality like glitches in the universe. They did not slow for the planetary shields. They slipped through the gaps with arrogant ease. Napoleon stood at the head of the table, his hands gripping the brass railing until his knuckles turned white. He watched the raid unfold not with fear, but with a terrifying absorption. He was analyzing the flow of the attack. They were not spreading out to pillage the hab blocks. They were not harvesting slaves from the outer slums. They were driving a spear point straight toward the governor's palace. "They are hunting, Napoleon," murmured his voice, cutting through the noise. Not for flesh, but for a specific prize. He looked at the trajectory lines. They converged on him. The realization hit him with the force of a cannonball. In a galaxy where souls were currency, his an anomaly from another time, a spirit of immense will displaced across aeons, was a diamond in a pile of coal. He was the prey. "Signal the transport convoys in Sector 4. Napoleon barked, turning to the Voxmaster. "Order them to halt their evacuation. Turn them broadside to the incoming vector. Vent their plasma drives to create a thermal bloom." The room went deathly silent. Sector 4 was filled with refugees fleeing the earlier Ork zones. Tens of thousands of civilians packed into bulk haulers. My lord the Voxmaster stammered, his face draining of blood. "That will make them perfect targets. The Drukhari will butcher them. They will stop to harvest them." Napoleon corrected his face, devoid of pity. "It will slow their advance by 12 minutes. 12 minutes allows me to reposition the Hydra batteries. Do it, abomination." The word cracked like a whip. Inquisitor Vharr strode forward, his power sword humming in its scabbard. The servo skulls around him shrieked in binary agitation. You would feed the Emperor's flock to the wolves to buy time. This is not war, Valerius. This is sacrifice to the Dark Prince. Napoleon spun around, his gray eyes blazing. "I do not know your Dark Prince Inquisitor. I know logistics. If those ships reach the palace before the batteries are set, the city falls. Everyone dies. If the convoys stall them, only the convoys die. It is arithmetic. It is heresy." Vharr roared, grabbing the Voxmaster's shoulder, stopping his hand from keying the order. "The Imperium protects. We do not offer up the innocent as meat shields." Napoleon stepped closer, invading the Inquisitor's personal space, ignoring the towering height difference. "Then you will lose. You protect the few and damn the many. I will save the city, Inquisitor, even if I have to pave the road to victory with their bones. That is the burden of command. A burden you clearly do not possess the stomach for." The tension was a physical thing, a spark ready to ignite the powder keg. Vharr looked at the tactical map, then at the trembling Voxmaster. He saw the cold, unassailable logic in Napoleon's plan, and it sickened him to his core. It was the logic of a machine effective and soulless. "I will not permit it," Vharr hissed. He turned to his retinue. "Interrogator Kalen, take Squad Primus. Intercept the Drukhari Vanguard at Sector 4. Buy the civilians time to escape. We will do what the governor is too cowardly to do. We will fight." Napoleon watched them go, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He didn't stop them. He didn't argue. As Vharr stormed out, Napoleon turned back to the Voxmaster, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let the Inquisitor go. And while he is engaging the enemy, reposition the artillery to cover his position." "To support him," Lord the Voxmaster asked, hopeful. To use him, Napoleon replied, tracing a line on the map. If the Drukhari are busy killing the Inquisition, they are not killing me. The bait has merely changed flavor. The smell of ozone from the teleportarium flare lingered as Vharr's team departed. On the screen, the shadow ships of the Drukhari adjusted their course, sensing the new potent souls entering the kill zone. Napoleon watched the blips merge. The chess game had become a brawl, but the pieces were moving exactly where he needed them. Logic, he whispered to the empty air, is the only god that answers prayers. Chapter 5. A gift from Camargue, the spire of Saint Lysander, an enclave of marble balconies and hanging gardens designed for the nobility, had become a slaughterhouse. The air, usually sweet with the scent of chemically preserved roses, was now thick with the copper tang of blood and the sickly sweet perfume of neurotoxins. Inquisitor Vharr stood amidst the ruin of a promenade, his power sword Libertas crackling with a furious energy that illuminated the carnage in strobing flashes of blue. Around him, the civilians he had sworn to protect were dying. They did not die bravely. They died screaming, their bodies convulsing as crystalline splinters shredded their nervous systems. The Drukhari moved like smoke, like nightmares given form. They were blurs of obsidian armor and flayed skin, their laughter a high-pitched tittering that grated against the soul. Vharr parried a blow from a hecatrix, the impact jarring his arm up to the shoulder. He was faster than any unaugmented human, but these creatures, they danced within the gaps of time itself. Form up, back to back, Vharr roared, his voice amplified to deafening levels to cut through the screams. His interrogator Kalen fired his bolter in disciplined bursts, exploding the torso of a witch who leapt from a statue. But for every Xenos that fell, 3 more slipped from the shadows, their blades eager for the taste of agony. The purge seal on Vharr's chest was no longer pristine parchment. It was slick with a violet ichor that hissed where it touched the holy wax. Inquisitor Napoleon's voice crackled through Vharr's vox bead. It was calm, insufferably calm, devoid of the frantic rhythm of melee combat. My sensors indicate you are surrounded. The enemy density is increasing by the second. You are becoming a focal point. Vharr gritted his teeth, ducking under a razor flail that took a chunk out of his pauldrons. We are holding the line. We are the shield of the faithful. You are not a shield. Napoleon's voice returned cold as liquid nitrogen. You are a magnet. You are drawing them in. That is useful. Hold your position for 30 seconds. Do not advance. Do not retreat. There are civilians here. Vharr screamed, thrusting his sword through the throat of a Kabbalite warrior. If we hold, they will be butchered. The civilians are dead logic, Napoleon replied. They are casualties of geography. Secure the flank, Vharr, or die in a pile of moral superiority. The choice is yours. The sheer callousness of the command staggered Vharr almost as much as the physical blows. He looked around. The noble families huddled behind the fountain were being picked off one by unseen snipers. His presence wasn't saving them. It was merely prolonging their terror, making their suffering a more exquisite vintage for the Dark Eldar. A splinter rifle round found the gap in his armor, piercing his thigh. The pain was immediate and blinding, a white-hot fire that threatened to shut down his nervous system. He fell to one knee, the world narrowing to a tunnel of agony. Through the blur, he saw a raider skiff swoop down its hooked chains, dragging a screaming mother into the sky. He raised his bolt pistol, fired, and missed. The drug in his veins was slowing him down. The realization hit him with the force of a hammer. Valerius was right. Heroism here was a waste of resources. The enemy did not care for his bravery. They feasted on it. Kalen Vharr gasped, forcing himself to stand through sheer spite. Signal retreat to fall back to the Strategium perimeter. But the civilians, Lord Kalen shouted, firing wildly. Are already ghosts, Vharr spat the words out, tasting bile and blood. We move now, as the inquisitorial retinue broke formation and ran abandoning the screaming nobles to their fate. A thunderous roar tore the sky apart. From the hive spires above the artillery batteries repositioned by Napoleon only minutes prior opened fire. They did not aim for the Drukhari directly. They aimed for the architecture. The massive Gothic arches above the plaza shattered, raining tons of ferrocrete and gargoyles down upon the pursuing Xenos. The dust cloud swallowed the screams, burying both the hunters and their prey in a tomb of rubble. Vharr limped into the transport, watching the destruction through the rear hatch. He had survived. His team had survived. But the cost was a heavy stain on his soul. He touched the vox bead, his breathing ragged. "Valerius," he rasped. "Target neutralized," came the instant reply. "Welcome back to the War, Inquisitor. Now perhaps you are ready to listen." Vharr closed his eyes. The pain in his leg was nothing compared to the chill spreading in his heart. He was beginning to understand the monster he had come to judge. And God Emperor help him, he was beginning to need him. Chapter 6. The Miracle of Mechanics. The deeper levels of Antares Prime were a realm of perpetual twilight, illuminated only by the rhythmic birthing flash of arc welders and the molten glow of flowing metal. The forge was a cathedral to the god of rust and ignition. The air here was thick enough to taste a heavy soup of particulate ash promethium fumes and the copper tang of ancient wiring stripped bare. It was a place where human flesh felt soft, weak, and terribly temporary. Napoleon stood before a disemboweled Lehman Russ battle tank, his small figure cast in silhouette against the sparks raining down from the overhead gantries. He had discarded his heavy governor's cloak. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing pale arms that were now smeared with sacred unguents and industrial grease. In his hand, he held not a scepter, but a hydro-spanner. He was arguing with a god of machines. "The firing cycle is too slow," Napoleon stated, tapping the open breech of the tank's battle cannon. "The recoil dampeners are over-engineered. They prioritize the comfort of the crew over the rate of fire. Remove the secondary hydraulics. Lock the barrel." Magos Dominus Zero Sigma hovered beside him, supported by a forest of mechadendrites that writhed like metallic cobras. The tech priest's face was a mask of brass, and sensors his organic eyes, long since replaced by glowing optics. To remove the dampeners is to anger the machine spirit. The Magos chattered, his voice a dissonance of binary static and high Gothic. "The recoil will shatter the chassis. The spirit requires the cushion of the ritual. The spirit requires targets to be destroyed." Napoleon countered, throwing the spanner to a waiting servitor. "I do not care if the chassis cracks after 1,000 rounds. I care that the first 100 rounds leave the barrel in under a minute." Physics does not bargain, Magos. It dictates. Bypass the safety protocols. The Magos hesitated. His internal logic gates screamed at the heresy. To modify a standard template construct was a crime against the Omnissiah. Yet as his optical sensors zoomed in on the governor's adjustments, he saw the undeniable elegance of the geometry. It was reckless. It was brutal. But it was mathematically perfect. "You speak of physics as if it were separate from the divine Zero Sigma," intoned a mechadendrite, extending to interface with the tank's cogitator. "But your modifications, they align with the golden ratio of destruction. The probability of catastrophic failure increases by 40%. The probability of enemy annihilation increases by 300%. "A worthy trade," Napoleon muttered, wiping his hands on a rag. Miracles are simply physics that have been hidden by time. Show me the power coupling. As the Magos plugged into the tank to enact the heretical bypass, he did not just touch the machine. He touched the man standing next to it. The tech priest's sensors sensitive to bioelectric fields and neural patterns swept over Napoleon. It was a reflex, a curiosity subroutine triggered by the anomaly of the governor's behavior. What Zero Zoa Sigma found made his cooling fans whir in sudden agitation. The mind of Governor Valerius was there, a hollow, dusty shell, like an abandoned house. But occupying that space was something else. A dense, roaring furnace of intellect. It was a mind constructed of geometric lines, artillery trajectories, and a sheer crushing will to order. The memories were not of the 41st millennium. They were of green fields, blue coats, and primitive black powder cannons. Yet the tactical acumen was superior to most Lord Generals the Magos had served. You are dense, the Magos clicked his vocalizers, dropping to a conspiratorial frequency. The data ghosts within you are ancient. You are not the Valerius that was written in the cogitators. Napoleon froze. He looked up at the towering cyborg, his eyes narrowing. I am what is required, he said softly. Does the Omnissiah care for the name of the tool Magos? Or does he care that the work is done? The Magos processed this. He calculated the variables. If he reported this anomaly to Inquisitor Vharr, the governor would be purged. The defense of Antares Prime would collapse. The efficient variables would be replaced by the inefficient dogmas of the ecclesiarchy. To a being of pure logic, the choice was obvious. The Omnissiah knows all, Zero Sigma replied, retracting his interface probe. And the Omnissiah appreciates efficiency. The bypass is complete. The cannon will fire as you command. The Magos reached into the folds of his red robes and produced a device. It was a Vox Gorget modified with exquisite craftsmanship, inlaid with silver circuitry. A gift, the Magos said, handing it to Napoleon. It connects directly to the localized noosphere. It will allow you to command the automated defenses without the latency of voice orders. It speaks the language of the machine. Napoleon took the device, feeling the cold weight of it. He fastened it around his neck. It hummed against his throat, a second pulse. Thank you, Magos, Napoleon said, a rare smile touching his lips. Now let us turn this city into a battery. From the shadows of the forge, the drone of servitors intensified, sounding like the falling rain. The Magos watched the little man walk away, surrounded by the aura of impending war. The tech priest purged the scan data of the governor's mind from his memory banks, marking it as corrupted file, do not recover. Logic had found its champion, and for the first time in centuries, the Magos felt something akin to hope. Or perhaps it was just a system error. Chapter 7. The Dissipation of Strength. The strategium of Antares Prime hummed with a tension that was tighter than a strangling cord. The holographic map of the Hive City was no longer a static image of defensive lines. It was a fluid, shifting organism. Napoleon stood before it, his hands moving with the frantic grace of a conductor, rearranging the icons of the Imperial Guard regiments. He was doing the unthinkable. He was taking the solid, unbreakable walls of the Astra Militarum and shattering them into fragments. Break the 8th Cadian into company-sized elements, Napoleon ordered, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Assign them independent sectors here, here, and here. Give the Scions free fire clearance for the upper spires. Strip the heavy weapons platoons from the main gate and distribute them to the mobile chimeras. The staff officers stared at him in horror. This went against every tenet of the Tactica Imperialis. The Codex taught that mass was strength. To divide was to invite defeat. To scatter the Emperor's soldiers was to offer them up as individual sacrifices to the darkness. You are dismantling the shield wall. Inquisitor Vharr stepped out from the shadows, his voice grinding like tectonic plates. The purge seal on his chest seemed to pulse with indignation. The Codex Astartes and the Lord Commander's decrees are clear. We hold the ground. We force the enemy to break against our fortifications. You are spreading us thin, Valerius. You are inviting the wolves into the flock. Napoleon did not look up from the map. He moved a marker representing a tank squadron to a flanking position miles away from support. I am not building a wall, Inquisitor. Walls are for those who intend to stay in one place and die. I am building a net. He looked up then, his gray eyes hard and unyielding. The Drukhari are fast. If we are solid, they will dance around us. If we are fluid, if we are everywhere, they have nowhere to run. Division is the tactic of the traitor. Vharr slammed his fist onto the hololith table, the impact causing the image to flicker. Chaos seeks to divide. The Emperor brings unity. You fragment the line. You create weak points. When the enemy strikes a lone company, they will be slaughtered without support. Their blood will be on your hands. And when they strike a massed formation with dark light weaponry, the entire regiment dies. Napoleon countered, his voice rising sharp and commanding. I do not create weak points. I create corps d'armée, independent limbs of a single body. They can fight alone, they can move alone, but they strike together. Commissar Vane stepped forward. He looked at the Inquisitor, then at Napoleon. He had spent his life executing men for cowardice, for deviating from orders. But he had seen the governor's mind at work. He had seen the impossible victory against the Orks. The dogma of the Schola Progenium warred with the reality of the battlefield in his mind. Lord Inquisitor Vane set his voice steady despite the sweat trickling down his neck. The governor. His logic holds. The Xenos avoid our strong points. If we do not chase them, we are merely targets waiting to be serviced. Vharr turned slowly to look at Vane. It was a look that promised a slow and painful interrogation later. You side with the gambler against the scripture, Commissar. Careful. The road to damnation is paved with tactical necessities. Napoleon interrupted, stepping between them. This is not gambling. This is geometry. Vane, take the 4th Mobile Infantry. You are no longer a commissar attached to a unit. You are its commander. You have full autonomy. Your objective is the northern industrial sector. Do not wait for orders. If you see an opening, take it. The room went silent. To give a commissar tactical command was rare. To give him autonomy was unheard of. Vane straightened, his spine rigid. He felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in years, not religious fervor, but professional pride. Yes, General. Vane saluted. Not Governor. General. Vharr watched the exchange, his hand hovering inches from his bolt pistol. He could end this now. He could declare, excommunicate traitores, put a bolt in Valerius's brain, and take command. The law was on his side. But as he looked at the map, he saw the pattern Napoleon was weaving. It was alien. It was terrifyingly arrogant. But it was beautiful. The Inquisitor lowered his hand, though his fingers kept twitching. Go then. Vharr whispered, the sound like a death rattle. Scatter your forces. But know this, Valerius. If this net of yours breaks, I will not just kill you. I will consign your entire bloodline to the oblivion of the warp. Napoleon turned back to the map, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. If the net breaks, Inquisitor Isht, I will not be alive for you to threaten. Chapter 8. The orbit of death. The upper spires of Hive Tertius pierced the cloud layer, rising like jagged tombstones into the vacuum of the lower atmosphere. Here, gravity was a suggestion, and the air was thin enough to boil blood. This was the hunting ground. The Drukhari raiders' sleek vessels of flayed skin and black metal screamed down from the void. They did not engage the heavy void shields below. They danced above them, their shadow fields flickering like mirages. They were here for the head of the serpent. They were here for the soul that shone like a lighthouse in the warp. Napoleon stood on the open observation deck of Spire 9, tethered by a maglock cable. The wind whipped his coat violently, threatening to tear him from the structure. Beside him, the scions of the 55th Alphic Hydras waited, their carapace armor painted in the matte gray of the storm clouds. They were statues, still their hell guns humming with a pitch that set teeth on edge. These were not standard issue. The power packs glowed with a violent, unstable violet light, the handiwork of Magos Zero Sigma. They are coming. Napoleon said, his voice transmitted directly to the squad leaders via the Vox Gorget. Do not fire at the ships. You cannot hit them. Wait for the deploy. A raider skiff banked sharply, its jagged prow tearing through a gargoyle. Figures leaped from the deck, incubi and witches, falling with impossible grace, their blades eager for the governor's flesh. They expected a terrified bureaucrat cowering in a bunker. They expected fear, now Napoleon whispered. The scions opened fire. But they did not aim at the falling warriors. They aimed at the landing zones, the gargoyles, the statues, the balconies where the Xenos were forced to land. Shoot at what they leave behind, Napoleon commanded. The modified hellguns unleashed torrents of overcharged plasma that didn't just burn. It destabilized the matter it touched. The landing platforms turned into molten slag instantly. The Drukhari masters of agility found no purchase. Their feet touched stone that dissolved into liquid fire. Panic, a rare emotion for the dark kin, rippled through their ranks. As they stumbled, the scions adjusted their aim. The air filled with the smell of ozone and searing flesh. It was not a battle. It was an execution by geometry. Napoleon had calculated the landing vectors. He had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. Commissar Vane, leading the flank element on a neighboring spire, watched the carnage. In any other campaign, he would be behind the line, bolt pistol drawn, watching for deserters. Today, he was at the front. He saw a gap in the Drukhari formation, a Drakon trying to rally his warriors. The old Vane would have shouted a litany of hate. The new Vane saw a tactical fulcrum. First platoon suppressive fire on the left. Vane roared into the Vox, vaulting over a parapet. Second platoon bayonets. Follow me. He led the charge not with blind faith, but with precise timing. The scions crashed into the disoriented Xenos. Vaughn's power sword met the clave of an incubus. It was a clash of brute imperial force against alien perfection. But Vane was not fighting alone. He was part of a machine. A squad of scions focused their fire on the incubus's joints, shattering the armor, allowing Vane to drive his blade through the alien's chest. A magnificent strike, Governor Vane shouted over the comms, kicking the corpse off his blade. He felt a rush of adrenaline that was entirely secular. He was winning, not surviving. Winning, maintain the pressure. Marshal Vane Napoleon's voice came back cool and detached. Do not celebrate. Finish them. On the main deck, the raid was collapsing. The Drukhari, realizing the trap, tried to retreat to their skiffs. But the sky was full of shrapnel from the flak batteries Napoleon had concealed in the church steeples. One figure remained. An Archon, his shadow field flickering and failing, stood amidst his dead retinue. He glared at Napoleon with eyes blacker than the void. He raised a pistol that fired the essence of pure agony. Napoleon did not flinch. He did not draw a weapon. He simply raised his hand. Simultaneously, 12 scions fired taser barbs into the Archon. The alien convulsed, his nervous system overwhelmed by millions of volts. He collapsed twitching at Napoleon's feet. Inquisitor Vharr arrived on a Valkyrie gunship just as the smoke was clearing. He stormed onto the deck, his bolter raised ready to purge the Xenos. He stopped dead. Napoleon stood over the paralyzed Archon. He was not delivering the Emperor's justice. He was leaning on his cane, studying the creature like a biologist studies a specimen. A jagged piece of alien armor, a vantai or ear guard, lay on the deck. Napoleon kicked it aside. "Secure him," Napoleon ordered the scions, "and take him to the isolation cells." "You mean to the pyre," Vharr growled, stepping forward. "We do not take prisoners of the Dark Kin. It is forbidden." Napoleon looked at the Inquisitor, his eyes cold as the space between stars. "He has information on their fleet movements. He is an asset. Burn him later if you must. But first he will speak." Vharr's finger tightened on the trigger. The heresy was no longer abstract. It was standing right in front of him, wearing a governor's face. Chapter 9. Senseless interrogation. The cell was not designed for holding life. It was designed for ending it slowly. Located deep within the bedrock of the governor's palace, it was a cube of damp ferrocrete that smelled of old rust and dried fear. There were no Gothic arches here, no gargoyles to watch over the sinners. Just a single harsh lumen strip buzzing like a trapped fly. In the center of the room, the Drukhari Archon was strapped to an interrogation chair. The alien was a ruin of his former magnificence. His armor had been stripped away, leaving his pale, wire-taut skin exposed to the chill air. He did not scream. He was of Camara. Pain was a lover, a delicacy to be savored. He stared at his captor with eyes that held the abyss of millennia, expecting the exquisite torture of an inquisitor. Instead, he got Napoleon. The general sat on a wooden stool reading a data slate, ignoring the alien completely. For 3 hours, Napoleon had not spoken, had not struck a blow, had not even looked at the creature. He simply sat, the rhythmic tick-tock of a pocket watch on the table, the only sound in the oppressive silence. To a being that fed on extreme sensation, this absolute mundane boredom was a torture worse than flaying. It was the denial of existence. The heavy blast door hissed open. Inquisitor Vharr stepped inside, the air instantly cooling around him. His boots crunched on the grit of the floor. He took in the scene, the silent general, the bound Xenos, and the utter lack of holy instruments. "This is an abomination." Vharr rasped his hand, resting on the grip of his bolter. To commune with the alien is to invite its corruption. "Stand aside, Valerius. I will grant it the Emperor's mercy." Napoleon did not stand. He turned a page on the data slate. "Mercy is a waste of capital," he said, his voice dry. "And torture is inefficient. A being like this enjoys pain. To hurt him is to feed him. I am starving him." Napoleon finally looked up, his gray eyes piercing. "He is bored, Inquisitor. And boredom makes the tongue loose. You play with fire in a room soaked in promethium." Vharr growled, stepping closer. The purge seal on his armor rattled. "The Xenos is not a man. It does not have a psychology you can exploit. It has a soul of shadow. Every moment it breathes, it whispers to the warp. You are risking the sanctity of this world for what coordinates?" "For victory," Napoleon replied, standing up and smoothing his coat. He walked to the Archon, who hissed a sound of desperate acknowledgement. "I want the location of their flagship. I want their supply lines. I want the truth, Inquisitor, not your sanctimony." Vharr drew his bolter. The sound of the slide racking back was deafening in the small room. He aimed the weapon not at the alien, but at the space between them. "There is no truth in the alien," Vharr recited the dogma flowing from him like a shield. "Only lies and madness. Step away, or I will judge you along with him." Napoleon turned to face the barrel of the gun. He did not blink. A strange mechanical clicking sound came from his throat, a suppression of the biological fear response. He looked at Vharr, and for a moment the Inquisitor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He saw the shadow of Joseph Fouché, of a secret police that operated without gods or demons, only cold, hard lists of names. "You are afraid," Napoleon stated softly. "Not of the alien. You are afraid of me. You are afraid that I can extract what I need without your rituals, without your faith." He took a step toward the gun. "If you kill him now, the fleet in orbit destroys the hive. Millions die, but your dogma remains pure. Is that your choice?" Silas Vharr, a pure graveyard. Vharr's finger quivered on the trigger. The logic was a trap. It was the rational heresy, the idea that the end justifies the means devoid of the Emperor's guidance. It was the path that had led Primarchs to damnation. But the Inquisitor looked at the data slot on the table. It showed the civilian casualty projections. They were dropping because of him. "The warp is watching you." Valerius Vharr hissed, lowering the weapon, but not holstering it. "It waits for the arrogant. It loves the man who thinks he is the smartest in the room." "The warp fears me," Napoleon replied, turning his back on the Inquisitor to face the alien. "Because I offer it nothing. No rage, no pleasure, no hope. Just order." He picked up a surgical scalpel, not to cut, but to tap rhythmically against the metal chair. Click, click, click. The Archon flinched at the monotony. "I give you 1 hour," Vharr spat, backing toward the door. "If he has not spoken, I burn this entire cell, and I will pray that you are in it." The door slammed shut. Napoleon did not watch him go. He leaned in close to the alien, his voice a whisper of terrifying banality. "Now, citizen, let us discuss the logistics of your fleet." Chapter 10. The Four Pillars. The final act of the war did not begin with a roar, but with a whisper of coordinates. The tactical hololith of Antares Prime burned with the intensity of a dying star, displaying a chaotic swirl of red icons. The Orc war boss Gorgut's Face Eater had rallied the remnants of the Green Tide, a massive wedge of muscle and scrap iron driving straight for the hive's throat. Flanking them, the surviving Drukhari skiffs darted like vultures, hoping to pick off the wounded in the confusion. Napoleon stood at the dais, his eyes closed for a brief second, visualizing the terrain not as a map, but as a chessboard. He smelled the familiar scent of victory, a blend of recycled air, ozone, and the phantom perfume of burnt gunpowder. When he opened his eyes, were shards of flint. He did not shout. He did not invoke the Emperor. He spoke to the machine. "Corpse, I and 2 refuse the center." Napoleon commanded, his voice carried instantly to the field via the Magos's Vox Gorget. "Lure the greenskins into the kill zone Alpha. Corps 3. Marshal Vane, execute the maneuver, Le Marteau." On the dusty plains outside the hive, the Imperial Guard did something they had not done in 10,000 years. They retreated. But it was not a rout. It was a seductive, disciplined withdrawal. The Orks, sensing weakness, roared their wah and surged forward, pulling themselves into a long, thin column, exposing their flanks to the hidden ravines. "They are taking the bait." Magos 0 Sigma clicked, his mechadendrites twitching in sympathetic rhythm with the artillery loaders miles away. The probability of Orc overextension is 94.3%. The enemy enters the envelope. Inquisitor Vharr watched from the observation deck, his hands gripping the railing. He saw the Imperial lines buckle, and every instinct in his body screamed heresy. To give ground was to deny the Emperor's dominion. Yet as he watched, he saw the shape of it. It was not a retreat. It was the drawing back of a bowstring. "Now," Napoleon whispered, From the east and west, the hidden cores of Three and Ivorder emerged from the ruins of the industrial sector. They did not just attack. They slammed into the Orc flanks with the precision of a hydraulic press. At the same moment, the retreating center stopped, dug in, and unleashed a wall of last fire. The Orcs were boxed in. The four pillars of Napoleon's army had become a prison. Heavy artillery, Napoleon ordered, his finger tracing a line across the holographic mass of greenskins. Sector 7 to 9. Rolling barrage. Walk it in. The screen turned white. The ground shook beneath their feet, a rhythmic thumping that sounded like the heartbeat of the planet. On the monitors, the Orc charge disintegrated. It wasn't war anymore. It was industrial liquidation. The Drukhari, seeing their meat shields vaporized, tried to pull up, but they had flown too close to the thunder. The anti-air batteries, pre-sighted by Napoleon's geometry, swatted them from the sky like annoying insects. Marshal Vane's voice crackled over the vox, distorted by the roar of battle, but unmistakable in its triumph. "The trap is closed, General. We have them in a crossfire. It's a slaughter." "It is not a slaughter," Marshal Napoleon replied, his voice devoid of bloodlust. "It is a conclusion. Maintain the perimeter. Let none escape." Vharr turned to look at the little man in the gray coat. The Inquisitor felt a cold sweat on his back. He had seen generals win through faith, through fury, through attrition. He had never seen one win through algebra. It was terrifying. It was sterile. It rendered the enemy's rage irrelevant. "You have turned war into an equation," Vharr said, the awe in his voice mixed with horror. "There is no glory in this, only efficiency." Napoleon looked up from the map of the reflection of the dying Orcs dancing in his eyes. "Glory is for the dead Inquisitor. Efficiency is for the living." He checked his pocket watch. "The battle will conclude in 12 minutes. Have the scribes prepare the victory dispatch." The Magos let out a burst of binary code that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "The logic of the way," Zero Sigma intoned. "Perfect." Chapter 11. The Final Judgment. The silence that followed the victory was heavier than the shelling. The Strategium was cleared of lower-ranking personnel. The air scrubbers worked overtime to remove the smell of sweat and fear, but the scent of ozone remained the scent of power. The war was over. The Orcs were ash. The Drukhari were scattered dust. Now the real conflict began. Napoleon stood alone at one end of the long tactical table. He had removed his coat, brushing the dust from the sleeves with meticulous care. He did not look like a man who had just saved a world. He looked like a man waiting for a train. At the other end of the table stood Inquisitor Silas Vharr, flanked by two towering stormtroopers. Marshal Vane and Magos Zero Sigma stood to the side, silent witnesses to the impending execution. Vharr placed a heavy iron box on the table. He opened it, revealing the rosette of his office and a bolt pistol loaded with a single mass-reactive shell. He did not look angry. He looked tired. The weight of 10,000 years of dogma pressed down on his shoulders. "Governor Valerius Vharr," began his voice, echoing in the empty room. "I have reviewed the logs. I have analyzed the tactical data. I have communed with the Emperor's tarot." Napoleon stopped brushing his coat. He rested his hands on the head of his cane and looked Vharr in the eye. "And you have saved this world," Vharr continued, his hand hovering over the pistol. "You have preserved the Emperor's tithe. You have destroyed the Xenos. By all metrics of the Administratum, you are a hero." Vharr paused, the red lenses of his mask dimming slightly. "But you did not do it with faith. You did not do it with hatred. You did it with reason. You elevated the human mind above the imperial creed. You proved that logic can succeed where prayer fails. Is success a crime? Inquisitor Napoleon asked, his voice soft, dangerous. In the 41st millennium, yes, Vharr whispered. If the masses learn that they can save themselves, they will stop needing the Emperor. They will stop needing us. You are a cancer, Valerius, a benign tumor that will eventually kill the host. You are a rational heretic. Marshal Vane stepped forward, his hand on his sword hilt. Lord Inquisitor, this is madness. He is the greatest commander I have ever seen. Silence, Marshal Vharr barked, the authority of the Inquisition snapping like a whip. You have been seduced by his results. You do not see the spiritual rot. Vharr picked up the bolt pistol. He aimed it directly at Napoleon's heart. The servo skulls recorded the moment for the archives. I declare you excommunicate traitores, not for what you have done, but for what you are. History cannot be allowed to remember you. Napoleon did not flinch. He did not beg. He looked at the gun barrel with a look of profound disappointment. You are wrong about history, Inquisitor Napoleon said, his voice steady. History is not written by the priests. It is written by the victors. And you. You are making a tactical error. There are no tactics left, Vharr said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Only judgment. Wait, the voice was mechanical, grinding, and absolute. Magos Zero Sigma stepped between the gun and the general. The tech priest's mechadendrites flared out, forming a protective halo. Magos Vharr warned, do not interfere. Incoming transmission. And the Magos stated his voxcaster, amplifying a signal from the void. Priority Alpha Ultima. Encryption code High Lords. Origin Sector Command. Vharr froze. A transmission of that priority override was impossible to ignore. The Vox unit on the table hissed to life. A voice ancient and withered filled the room. Inquisitor Vharr, cease hostilities immediately. The governor is claimed. Vharr lowered the gun, confusion warring with his duty. Claimed by whom? By the Indomitus Crusade, the voice crackled. The Lord Guillemon requires competent logistics officers. Do not waste the asset. Napoleon smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. It seems, he said, picking up his coat, that reason has friends in high places. Vharr stared at him, the bolt pistol hanging uselessly at his side. He had lost. The dogma had lost. The monster would live. Chapter 12. The Eternal Heretic. The landing bay of the Judgment of Terra was a cavern of steel and shadow, open to the cold vacuum of space, shielded only by a flickering atmospheric field. Outside, the stars burned with indifferent brilliance. Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the ramp of the shuttle that would take him away from Antares Prime, away from the world he had saved, and into the infinite darkness of the galaxy. He was no longer Governor Valerius. That title had been stripped and the records expunged. He was now merely Asset 40K, a nameless resource in the vast ledger of the Imperium. But he wore his gray coat and he carried his cane. He was still the emperor of his own soul. Marshal Vane stood at attention, his uniform crisp, his eyes wet. He snapped a salute that was perfect in its geometry. "We will hold the line," General Vane said. "The core system remains. Maintain the drill." Marshal Napoleon nodded, acknowledging the soldier. "Discipline is the mother of victory." He turned to Magos Zero Sigma, who was running a final diagnostic on Napoleon's Vox Gorget. "The logic engines will miss you," the Magos clicked. "You were an elegant anomaly, and you, Magos, are a rational machine in an irrational universe. Keep the oil burning." Finally, Napoleon turned to Inquisitor Vharr. The giant in power armor stood like a statue of judgment, his face hidden, his animosity radiating like heat. "You think you have won, Vharr," said his voice low. "But you are just trading one prison for another. The Lord Guilliman is a Primarch, a son of the God Emperor. He will see through you. He will see the godless void in your heart. Napoleon stepped onto the ramp. The wind from the atmospheric cyclers whipped his hair. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive black ship, yet his shadows seemed to stretch across the deck, long and imposing. "I do not seek to deceive a demigod inquisitor," Napoleon replied, looking out at the stars. "I seek to organize him." "You are a heretic," Vharr said. But the conviction was gone. It was just a statement of fact now. "I am a necessity," Napoleon countered. "And I will build an empire of reason amidst your galaxy of skulls. Even if I have to do it one victory at a time." With a hiss of hydraulics, the shuttle door closed, sealing the savior inside. Vharr watched as the craft lifted off its engines, flaring blue against the black. He watched until it was just a speck of light vanishing into the warp. The Inquisitor touched the purge seal on his chest. It felt cold. He turned back to the dark interior of his ship, the sound of Napoleon's last words still echoing in his mind. "History is not written by the priests." Vharr walked into the shadows, leaving the light behind. The 41st Millennium had a new player, and the board would never be the same again. Napoleon has been recruited by Robert Guilliman. What happens when the master of artillery meets the master of logistics? Which faction should Napoleon conquer next? Tell us in the comments.